You trust your eyes more than almost anything else. You may doubt memory, question other people, even mistrust your own emotions. But when you look at the world, you feel certain you are meeting reality directly. The chair is there, the window is there, the face across from you is there. Seeing feels immediate, clean, and beyond argument, as if truth arrives the very moment light touches your eyes. That confidence is so natural that most people never stop to question it. But they should, because the unsettling truth is that your eyes never actually show you reality as it is. They cannot. What you call sight feels like direct contact with the world, yet it is really the end result of delay, filtering, interpretation, and reconstruction. In other words, you do not simply open your eyes and receive reality. You open your eyes, gather fragments, and then your brain builds something it hopes is close enough to keep you alive. That difference matters more than it seems. Most people imagine vision as a kind of transparent window. The world sits outside, complete and stable, and the eyes faithfully let it in. It is a comforting picture, but it is false. Your eyes are not windows. They are biological instruments, narrow and imperfect, extracting only limited information from an unimaginably larger world. Even before the brain gets involved, the visual signal is already incomplete. By the time you become conscious of seeing, reality has already been reduced, edited, and delayed. And yes, delayed. The world you think you are seeing right now is not exactly the world as it exists right now. Light takes time to travel. Signals take time to move through the eye. Neural processing takes time to organize those signals into something coherent. The delay is tiny, so tiny that daily life hides it from you. But hidden does not mean absent. What feels immediate is not immediate. What feels direct is not direct. What feels certain is built on a chain of physical processes so complex and selective that the final image in your mind is closer to a controlled interpretation than a perfect copy. This is where the darker part begins. Because once you realize that sight is not passive reception, another question appears. If you are not simply seeing reality, then what exactly are you seeing? A useful model, a survival-oriented simplification, a prediction, a beautifully convincing illusion stitched together from incomplete evidence. The answer is not that the world is fake. The answer is stranger than that. The world is real, but your access to it is never pure. Vision is not truth entering the mind untouched. It is reality translated through physics, biology, and the urgent needs of a nervous system that evolved not to know everything, but to know enough. And once you understand that, the simple act of looking at anything becomes far less innocent. Because the moment you trust most completely may also be the moment when you are mistaking construction for contact. To understand why your eyes never actually see reality, you have to begin with something even more basic than sight itself: light. People talk about light as though it carries the world to us intact, as if it lifts reality off the surface of things and places it neatly inside the eye. But light does nothing of the kind. Light does not deliver truth. It delivers traces. When you look at a tree, your eye does not receive tree. It does not receive bark, leaf, meaning, age, or life. It receives photons, tiny packets of electromagnetic radiation reflected in certain directions, at certain wavelengths, under certain conditions. That is all. The richness you experience comes later. The world presents itself as solid, whole, and self-evident, but the physical signal entering the eye is thin, partial, and brutally limited. This is the first great contrast that most people never think about. We experience objects, but the eye receives light. We feel certainty, but the signal is fragmentary. We believe we are looking outward at reality, when in fact the entire process begins with a narrow stream of coded information that says remarkably little on its own. Even that stream is restricted almost beyond belief. The electromagnetic spectrum is vast, stretching from radio waves to gamma rays, but human vision detects only a tiny sliver of it. The visible world feels complete only because your biology edits the rest into silence. Infrared is real. Ultraviolet is real. X-rays are real. Entire domains of physical existence surround you at every moment, yet your eyes are blind to them. So before perception even starts, most of reality has already been excluded, and what remains still does not arrive cleanly. Light can scatter, dim, reflect, refract, distort, or vanish. Surfaces absorb some wavelengths and reject others. Distance weakens the signal. Motion changes what reaches you. Shadows erase detail. Glare overwhelms it. The atmosphere itself interferes. Under every ordinary act of seeing, there is a quiet struggle between what exists and what can actually survive the journey into the eye. Then the eye imposes another set of limits. Your retina is not a perfect detector. It is unevenly built, sharper in some regions, weaker in others. Color fades at the edges. Fine detail is concentrated in a narrow central zone. There is even a blind spot where the optic nerve exits the eye, a literal hole in visual input that you never consciously notice. The scene feels seamless, but the raw material is full of gaps. And there is another complication people rarely consider. Light never tells you why something is there. It does not explain cause, intention, danger, or significance. The same pattern of light can mean different things in different contexts. A shape in fog may be a stranger, a tree, or a shadow. A face can look calm while concealing fear. A distant glimmer can be a reflection or a threat. Light carries surface information, not meaning. Meaning is imposed later. So even at its clearest, the visual signal is not reality understood. It is reality reduced to hints awaiting interpretation. That is why the phrase "I saw it with my own eyes" sounds stronger than it really is. Yes, you received light. Yes, your retina registered patterns. But between the world outside and the mind inside lies a chain of constraints so severe that the original signal is less like a full picture and more like a handful of clues. And clues are not the same thing as reality. They are only the beginning of an interpretation. Because once those fragments enter the nervous system, something else must take over. Something that can fill in missing data, impose order, and turn scattered light into the stable world you believe you are directly seeing. Once light has been reduced to a thin, imperfect signal, the real work begins. And that work does not happen out in the world. It happens inside you. We imagine the brain as a passive witness, quietly receiving visual facts from the eyes and filing them into consciousness. But the brain is not a witness. It is a builder. What reaches your retina is incomplete, unstable, and often ambiguous. Yet what reaches awareness feels smooth, continuous, and dependable. That gap is the central miracle and the central deception of vision. The brain takes broken signals and turns them into a usable world. It fills in what is missing, suppresses what is distracting, guesses what is likely, and stabilizes what should feel chaotic. In every ordinary moment of sight, your nervous system is not just recording reality, it is editing it into something livable. This is why vision feels effortless. The labor is hidden. Even your sense of a present depends on this editing. By the time a scene becomes conscious, the brain has already sorted, prioritized, and organized it. You feel as though awareness arrives first and interpretation follows. In truth, interpretation is already shaping what awareness will ever be allowed to notice. Consider how often your eyes move. They make tiny, rapid jumps called saccades, constantly scanning the scene. In raw physical terms, that should make the world feel jerky and unstable. But you do not experience that. Your brain suppresses the blur, stitches the fragments together, and presents continuity where none exists in the incoming signal alone. The world feels still not because the signal is stable, but because your brain works constantly to make it appear that way. The same thing happens with absence. You have a blind spot in each eye, a place where there are no light-detecting cells at all. By any simple theory of sight, you should constantly notice a hole in the world, but you do not. The brain fills the gap automatically, borrowing surrounding patterns and inventing a plausible continuation. Part of what you call seeing is literal fabrication, not fantasy but construction. Color, depth, motion, and shape are also less direct than they seem. Color is a perceptual result created from wavelength processing, context, and contrast. Depth is inferred from cues such as shadow, overlap, perspective, and binocular disparity. Motion is interpreted through changes across time, then stabilized into coherent movement. Shape is recognized by matching patterns against previous experience. In every case, the brain is doing more than receiving. It is solving, and because it is solving, it relies on prediction. This may be the darkest part of all. The brain is not waiting patiently for the world to explain itself. It is continuously forecasting what is probably there, then comparing incoming data against those expectations. Perception is partly a controlled guess. The world you consciously experience is built from signals, memory, expectation, context, and probability. You do not merely see what is there, you see what your brain is prepared to make out of what is there. That is why illusions are so revealing. They are moments when the machinery of perception becomes visible. An illusion shows you the brain's habits laid bare, its hunger for patterns, its dependence on contrast, its trust in prediction, its preference for coherence over raw truth. The lesson is not that your eyes have failed. The lesson is that seeing has always been an act of interpretation. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes perfect sense. The nervous system was not designed to produce a pure account of reality. It evolved to guide action under pressure. Speed often matters more than perfect accuracy. A world rendered usefully is better for survival than a world rendered completely. So the brain does what efficient systems do. It compresses, predicts, simplifies, and moves on, which means the world you think you are looking at is not the world in itself. It is your brain's best working model, assembled in real time from fragments of light and shaped by biological need. And once you accept that, a more unsettling implication emerges. If perception is a construction tuned for survival, then human vision may reveal only a narrow, carefully managed slice of what reality actually is. Once you understand that the brain constructs perception from fragments, another conclusion follows with almost unbearable force. The world you see is not just incomplete, it is biologically provincial. It is a local solution tailored to a very particular creature living at a particular scale. Human vision feels universal only because it is the only version you have ever known. But in truth, it is narrow, selective, and deeply parochial. It flatters you by feeling complete and deceives you by hiding how selective it really is. The visible spectrum is the clearest example. What you call light is only a tiny band within a much larger electromagnetic reality. Beyond it stretch radio waves, microwaves, infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays, all just as real as the colors you know. The universe is saturated with structure, energy, and information that never appears in ordinary sight. You do not stand in the midst of a fully seen world. You stand inside an ocean of hidden signals, perceiving only a thin, illuminated strip that your species happened to evolve to use. Even within that strip, perception is shaped less by truth than by utility. Evolution did not reward organisms for grasping the deepest nature of reality. It rewarded organisms for detecting what helped them survive long enough to reproduce. Edges matter, motion matters, contrast matters, faces matter, threats matter. The eye and brain became exquisitely good at extracting what was useful for action, not what was complete in an ultimate sense. The world appears meaningful to you because your nervous system highlights what mattered to your ancestors, not because it has unlocked reality as such. That idea is both humbling and dark. We like to believe that seeing gives us privileged access to what is there. But what if vision is not a revelation of the world, only a survival interface? What if color, solidity, continuity, and even the feeling of a stable visual field are less like truth and more like icons on a screen? Helpful, reliable enough, but still abstractions standing in for deeper processes we never directly encounter? Other creatures make this limit harder to ignore. Birds can detect ultraviolet patterns on feathers and flowers. Some snakes sense infrared heat. Insects respond to visual cues that are invisible to us. Mantis shrimp possess forms of photoreception so different from ours that their perceptual world may be almost unimaginable. None of this means their experience is complete either. It means only that reality supports far more modes of access than the one we casually mistake for reality itself. And even these biological differences only hint at the scale of our ignorance. Instruments let us extend perception beyond the eye, revealing galaxies in radio frequencies, bodies in thermal signatures, bones in X-rays, atoms through indirect imaging, and the cosmic background of an early universe no human eye could ever witness directly. Every technological extension carries the same message. Reality is vastly richer than unaided sensation suggests. The world is not merely larger than we see. It is organized in layers that ordinary perception was never built to enter. So the darker truth is not simply that your eyes can be fooled. It is that your entire visual life unfolds inside a narrow biological corridor. You do not fail to see everything because you are careless. You fail because you are human. Your senses are not broken. They are bounded. And those bounds are not minor imperfections. They are defining conditions of your contact with the world. Yet this realization should not end in despair. It should end in a more disciplined kind of humility. To see clearly is not to claim full access to reality, but to recognize the limits under which access is granted. And once that humility appears, the question changes. The mystery is no longer how much you can see. It is how you should live, think, and trust your own experience, knowing that every image you call the world is only a useful fraction of what is really there. There is something almost unsettling about realizing that the sense you trust most is also the sense most capable of giving you a polished approximation instead of the thing itself. Yet there is also something strangely liberating in it. If your eyes never actually deliver reality in its full, untouched form, then the goal of seeing was never absolute possession of truth. The goal was orientation, navigation, survival, a workable relationship with a world too large, too fast, too layered, and too complex to be received whole. That changes the meaning of perception. It means the world you experience is not false but filtered, not imaginary but interpreted, not a lie but a construction built under pressure by physics, biology, memory, and need. What you call sight is reality translated into a form the human organism can act on. The translation is useful, often beautiful, and sometimes astonishingly accurate. But it is still a translation. And confusion begins when we mistake usefulness for completeness. This mistake does not happen only in science. It shapes everyday life. We assume that what feels vivid must be true, that what seems obvious must be reliable, that what we saw must be exactly what happened. But vision is never that innocent. The brain edits before awareness arrives. Context bends interpretation. Expectation sharpens some details and erases others. Even confidence itself can become part of the illusion. A person can feel absolutely certain they saw something clearly when, in reality, they experienced a highly compressed and reconstructed version of events. This should make us more careful, not more cynical. The lesson is not that nothing can be known. The lesson is that knowledge begins with humility. To see well is not merely to look harder. It is to remember that perception is bounded, that certainty must be earned, and that reality always exceeds the model we carry of it. The mind reaches outward through narrow channels, builds a stable world from fragments, then forgets the labor that made stability possible. Wisdom begins when that forgetting ends, and perhaps this is where the subject becomes more human than scientific, because in the end, the danger was never only that your eyes hide parts of the world. The deeper danger is that you may live as though what appears to you is all there is. That is true in vision, but it is also true in judgment, memory, identity, and belief. Again and again, human beings mistake their interface with reality for reality itself. We confuse perspective with totality. We confuse contact with comprehension. We confuse seeing with understanding. But once that illusion breaks, something better can take its place, not despair, but wonder, not blind certainty, but disciplined awe. The fact that you do not receive the world directly does not make existence smaller. It makes it stranger, deeper, and more magnificent. It means every ordinary glance is taking place across enormous gaps between photon and color, signal and meaning, world and mind. And somehow across those gaps, a living brain still manages to assemble enough truth to recognize a face, read a sky, love a landscape, and search for what lies beyond the visible. So no, your eyes never actually see reality. Not fully, not purely, not as it is in itself. They never did. But that does not make your experience worthless. It makes it partial, fragile, and profoundly human. And perhaps the beginning of real wisdom is not learning to trust your sight more, but learning to hold it with humility. To see clearly, while never forgetting that reality is always richer than what any pair of eyes can contain.